What do you do when you know you are capable of doing more, but every opportunity requires experience that you don't have yet? That's the challenge our next guest, Pooja, faced when she wanted to transition from engineering into product management. Today, she has held product leadership roles across PayPal, Lending Club, and Sony PlayStation. In this episode of the Backend story, I sit with Pooja and we unpacked how she made that transition happen. We talk about some of the habits like marathon training, classical dance, and competitive swimming helped her build resiliency, discipline, and confidence that later proved invaluable in her career. We explore the pivotal moments that led her to pursue an MBA and the mentors who helped her see possibilities beyond engineering. We'll also discuss the impact of AI in product management and why those who learn to work along with these tools will have significant advantage in the years ahead. Whether you are an engineer who is considering a move into product, a professional thinking of your next career move, or someone who wants to learn decision making and grow faster, this episode is packed with practical lessons that you can apply from day one. And this is Backend Story. I'm your host, Rakesh. Let's get started. You did your engineering at University of Illinois. What drew you into computer science?
Yeah, candidly, I went in not really knowing too much about engineering. And honestly, I didn't even go in with knowing too much about computer science. I actually really liked math and physics. It was some of my favorite subjects to do. And honestly, around me, I had a lot of folks growing up in Silicon Valley who are engineers. So there was a preset perspective on that. And my dad, of course, is an engineer as well. And so I think that had a heavy influence for going in the engineering realm. In particular, doing computer science, though, I think it was at that time like a new area that folks were diving into with a lot of growth, like very exponential growth, right? Initially, it was chips and electronics and kind of going in that space where my dad was in that area.
Okay.
But computer science, human-computer interaction, building algorithms, all of that was kind of very new and nascent. And I think that was something that was interesting to me. Did I know it was computer science? No. Like I didn't go in knowing that, but I think it kind of worked out where I said, okay, let me try computer science. And then U of I was a great university. So I think going in, I kind of went in blind, not really knowing what I'm getting out of it. But I think it was, in hindsight, a very good decision to go down computer science.
After you graduated, you joined VMware. Was it any different from what you expected when you were doing engineering?
Yes, vastly. I feel that what you learn in school is very book present, at least from my experience. At a company, when I first started, like VMware, you're actually solving a much larger solution, and you're really a small sliver in that solution and what you're working in. So I think there was a lot of learning that I had to do when I joined about working in the industry. What does that mean? Working in the industry processes. And then understanding this huge monolith company has many different segments and how do they all work together? So I think there was honestly, a lot of learning on the job that happened more for me to apply directly than my education from U of I. Because at U of I, we might have taken like database classes or Java classes or C++ classes and so on as well. But at VMware, it was more of applying the languages to the problem that we're solving. And so there was a lot of learning, I think, and tremendous learning in those few years.
Do you think an internship would work better here because that bridges the gap between the college and a company?
Yes, I do think internships help bridge the gap to some degree. An internship is a great way to get your feet in the water, to understand corporate life and understand how that fits in the grand scheme of a program or that company or whatever you're working in. It's another way to also learn how individuals contribute in that company, because otherwise you're always surrounded by students. So I think an internship gives you all of those opportunities. But I will say that irrespective of having an internship, there is learning that you will do once you start full-time too. And with an internship, you definitely get some of those practices in early on, so it helps.
Yeah. So there's a concept of capstone
Yes.
in colleges, right?
Yes.
So that's almost like building products. It need not be a production grade, but at least you get a hands-on trying to build something. So you figure out how to do it, what tools to use. So probably that will also help along with, just not completing your course, but doing some kind of a capstone projects or internships or any pet projects for that
Yes.
matter. You mentioned about you participated in marathons, you participated in competitive swimming and a dancer as well. So what are the qualities that or skills that you picked up from doing these things that you were able to apply in your daily life and also at work?
Resiliency is one of the big ones. That specifically I learned during my training for marathons, because you're with yourself for those 13 miles or 26 miles. You're with yourself when you're doing a triathlon or you're biking. And a lot of times it's literally you against yourself. And in the training space, there's a phrase called, "Oh, I'm hitting the wall." Essentially, you're hitting a place where you don't think you can get past it.
Okay.
You are like mile 18, mile 20. I cannot do it. I need to walk. I need to stop this race. That is the actual race. That's when you're actually challenging yourself to say, hey, let's just get to the next milepost. Let's just get to the next 800 meters. Let's just finish the next mile until you get to the end. I think that resiliency is something that I learned in the marathon training space, because it was the first time I was really running a lot, right? And you're running by yourself, and it's very easy to talk yourself out of it.
Yep.
And it's also very easy to say, I cannot do it. That's like the easiest phrase anyone can say. So I think that's honestly, one of the very strong mindsets that I have, but I keep working towards it because it's not something that's very easy to do. And I think that's the other piece that I would say I learned is if your basics, your core starting point is strong, you can really achieve a lot. You just need to be resilient to get there. And that's a constant thing that you have to work on, a constant way to make sure, hey, let me practice resiliency. Let me practice challenging myself. Because a lot of times it's a lot easier to say, oh, I don't mind just, watching a movie for a couple hours, but getting out of the house for the run is the biggest challenge. When you're hitting the wall, getting past that wall is the biggest challenge. And I think those are things that I learned from these physical activities that have impacted me in work as well, and in what I do, in why I wanted to do an MBA, why I decided to move as well. I can completely imagine in my races the time when I hit that. Like even now, even if it's been many years, I can imagine that time, because that's when I'm like, why did I even sign up for this race?
Yeah.
Like, why did I decide to run that much for fun? But I think as you do that, you start building that confidence that, hey, I can do it. It's hard. It's not easy. I'm lucky to be able to do it, but I can do it. And I think that's the one takeaway. And when you talked about like when you go on the stage, it's different. In practice, it's different. And I'll give like a scenario that happened with my Arngatrum. So practice was great. It was going well. I'd been practicing for almost a year before I performed. Then certain situations happened where my guru had to go to India for personal reasons. And so I had another teacher come in, teach me just to finish off my training so that I could perform in a month. That in itself was a challenge because it's a different way of teaching. There were suddenly changes to the choreography, which means I had to memorize it so that my muscle memory could come into play on performance day. Along with that, the place where we actually did the performance, where I did my performance, the floor had been waxed the day before, so it had become incredibly slippery, and I was dancing on a plate, and there were a lot of things that became very challenging. And the biggest thing at that time was what you just said. You shut your mind and trust your practice. And that gets very hard, but you need to just be able to step into it fully believing that you can do that. And at that time, there were a lot of mishaps that happened, even in the backstage. But overall, the performance went well. The people watching it had no idea. But for myself, to be able to shut that out and just continue with what I'm doing, it's not easy, but it was like a constant practice.
Before we continue, A few listeners mentioned they weren't getting notified when the new episodes were released. If you're enjoying the Backend story, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on so you don't miss any future conversations. Let's get back. Pivoted at that point from VMware and you decided to do MBA. What motivated you to do that? What were the thoughts that you had? What were the conversations that you had with your family and your friends? What it meant to you?
There were a couple hooks that got me thinking about it. One was I was in a project that was very small. So it was just me, another engineering lead, he was a tech lead, the product manager. And we were working on a very small project, but we were having an opportunity to meet the customer. And I actually ended up flying to the East Coast a couple of times to meet the customer in person to see what we were building for them. And I think that gave me an eye-opening experience to see the true customer that used the product. And VMware being an enterprise company, there are degrees of separation from the true customer.
Yeah.
And I think that opportunity gave me a chance to say, hey, do I actually like problem solving here? Or do I like problem solving one step prior, where the actual problem is being questioned, where I'm understanding what problem I'm solving as opposed to being in a place where I'm doing the solving itself. And I think that sparked that conversation. I talked to that product manager a lot. He was an amazing mentor as well. He brought me into a lot of those product conversation decisions. I, of course, was just sitting like a fly on the wall, but listening to how they were negotiating product features, what actually made the cut, what didn't make the cut. I think those conversations got me thinking about liking product. How does that connect to an MBA? I think the other piece of me, as this was happening, realized that I like engineering and I like problem solving, but I also understand that I'm not the best engineer. I am not the one who is, very quickly ramping into projects or moving into staff or moving into management. I like being an engineer, but I'm not as passionate about it as I would like. And I liked solving the problems a little bit upstream. And I think that made me think of maybe I'm at a time where I can do something else. And I tried actually internally to switch to product, but there were other scenarios that led me to not get that product role. Either I didn't have enough experience at VMware, I was not in that domain that I needed to move to, and I wanted to give it a try. I tried externally, same situation as well. I didn't have the experience, and it's kind of a catch-22 scenario. You need experience to get the role, but to get the role, you need experience. So it kind of connects the two.
But you said one of your product managers who gave you an opportunity and guided you during visit to the client location, wasn't he helping you out figure out some of the product rules within the company?
He was. Yes, he was. But even with getting a connection doesn't mean that you're getting that role, because maybe I don't have the skills for it. Maybe I like it, but I am not at the stage where I can practice as a product manager. And that's where I realized that there is a gap. Maybe I need some education. It could be reading, practicing it. Maybe I need education through a physical education route, like doing an MBA. Maybe I need to dive into other projects to see if I can do that. And so I tried to pick the ones that were a little bit easier for me to do, like pick other projects that I could be a part of to get those roles. But I had a mentor at VMware. Her name's Susie. Amazing woman. Like, she was the one who actually said, Pooja, consider doing an MBA. Instead of spending your time doing this and essentially coming back and saying, I didn't get it because of maybe not enough experience, not enough knowledge, not enough tenure, whatever reasons there could be. Instead of doing that, why don't you think of doing an MBA? It's a good way for you to do an MBA. Maybe you can do full-time, maybe you can do part-time, up to you. Do that, you'll get the basics of holistically a business. And then at that point, you'll get an idea, do I want to go to product? Do I want to stay in engineering? Or do I want to try other stuff like product marketing? Do I want to go into sales? And so she actually was the one that initiated that thought. And the reason I said having a mentor is like the best thing that you can do for yourself, which I also didn't realize, and I need to practice it too. She actually helped me practice for my GMAT. And I actually feel that sometimes having a mentor or having someone across from you, they actually see something in you you cannot see. And I think she might have been able to help me understand that, hey, maybe I should take that risk. Let me try it.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, kudos to her, because that's what got me to move into doing an MBA and moving into product. She was in product marketing and she said, I think it's something that you should try. And if you end up not doing it, okay, but give it a try.
You finished your MBA and you were an engineer at VMware before that. And you joined as a product manager at PayPal. How did that transition happen from MBA graduation to PayPal? What are the steps that you took to secure that job?
Couple things. My MBA was a part-time MBA. So I wanted to continue working while I was doing my MBA.
Okay.
Financially, that was the best option that I wanted to do. So that way I don't fully cut off my earnings. That also worked out a little bit better for me because it gave a little bit of a longer runway to figure out how I want to transition. My part-time MBA was a 3-year program. Mostly MBAs are 2-year programs, which is a very dedicated period of time that you're just in your MBA. This gave me a chance to work with other folks who are also working professionals while they're doing their MBA. So I think that's one piece that was slightly different because I continued staying within my working role while I was doing my MBA. And I tried to bring in, learn, and apply things that I was getting from my MBA back into my engineering role, and also using that time to figure out which areas do I like. So I think that's number one.
Okay.
Number two, as I wanted to switch, I actually did a couple things that I learned from my MBA. Because of the part-time MBA, I was trying to apply it directly. I updated my resume to fit more of a product role, even though I was an engineer. That's number one piece of advice. Build your resume to showcase the skills of the role that you want to get to, not about what you're just doing.
Yep.
Number three was I realized that the best way to get in contact with anyone is to do a cold email. So I, of course, was going into my network, reaching out to folks that I knew personally, folks that I have connections with, and also folks that are in particular product roles that I liked.
Okay.
Areas of companies that I was interested in, but obviously had no way to talk to anyone because I didn't know anyone that worked there. So I did a lot of cold messaging. It's kind of like a needle in the haystack situation. You have to reach out to a lot of folks before you get some feedback. I reached out to people to ask purely for a 15-minute call to learn about their role as a product manager. And surprisingly, so many folks were up for it. People like sharing about their experiences. They also like talking about the product role and what made them become a product manager, kind of similar to this situation. So talking to a lot of folks gave me some ideas of what I liked in product, and that's kind of what made me think about product as like my final destination. And then the last piece for how that conversion happened, of course, I reached out to people cold emails. For those folks, some of the people I liked and asked them, hey, I'm interested in this role, if you can help me understand at the company, not necessarily as a referral, but just as an awareness. Some folks were very kind to help with that conversation. Of course, I didn't go that far in some of those interviews and didn't even get the offer. But what I actually did do for the PayPal specific one was through a referral. I reached out to my network, and there was an individual who I knew. So she was actually hiring. And so she knew someone who was hiring, excuse me. And I gave her my resume and I applied online. And then even with the referral, you have to do the regular rounds of interviews. I did the round of interviews, and I was lucky enough to get that role because the person who was hiring, her name's Dia, she was expanding the team. So situationally, she was expanding the team. She was willing to bring people in. She also was a very strong believer in a product manager is not just someone who's done product for their life. It's someone that can bring different skill sets to become a product manager. So on her team were not just folks that had become product managers from the start of their career, but there are folks who moved in from program management, folks who moved in from engineering, folks that moved in from other various roles and had become a product manager in her team. I think she actually believed that. That's her true belief, that the skills as a product manager is not definitive to be an engineer or not definitive to be a data scientist or a program manager. There are the skills in each of those roles that can also apply as a product manager.
So
And she really helped us grow into that role.
in your case, you coming from engineering background, what has helped you as a product developer carrying those engineering skills?
Technical
Yeah.
thinking, being able to think architecturally as well, understand design from a technical perspective as well as design from like a UX and user perspective. And those aspects helped me in my engineering role, especially at PayPal, because it gave me a chance to understand challenges that the engineering team would bring to us without dismissing them, because those are valid scenarios and we can't just ask them to build A. And I think that helped as a product manager. So I was able to create a lot of good rapport with my engineering teams and my engineering manager because I understood a lot of the engineering technicalities and challenges that we would see.
So a lot of the times, the managerial level won't understand the complexities or the challenges that the engineering team faces. They are too pushy on the priorities and deadlines and stuff like that, but they won't understand why the engineering team is coming back to them and saying that, "Oh, you know what, this we did some feasibility study, this works, this doesn't work, this takes longer than that you are expecting." So if you don't have that bridge where the engineering team is coming from, most likely that you will dismiss that and say that, you know what, this is what the product is expecting, you just have to finish it, right?
Yeah, agreed. And I think um, it helps with prioritization, honestly. For a product manager, a lot of our role is about how do we prioritize what we want to do and work with our engineering counterpart to say, what can we do that is prioritized? Honestly, deciding where's the cut line. And those conversations and being able to have my technical hat on helped understand why certain features need to be prioritized higher and why certain features, though are a necessity, are not a necessity for our first release.
Walk me through a time as a product manager where you felt that and you're convinced strongly that's the right problem to solve, but eventually you figured you were wrong.
There's one instance that I can think of, and I'm keeping it within the PayPal space, but of course they've happened across other companies too. The area that I was in within PayPal, within the risk and compliance area, very data heavy. And data is the crux, especially in this day and age, data is the crux of decision making. That's what's used to make decisions go in one direction or the other direction. There was a particular product that I was working on, and my customer base, I knew what they needed, what the expectation was, and I built out product requirements to fulfill how to get this data to them in the right, appropriate way so they can make their decisions. And I was adopting a very early way of how that data was going to be structured, not our legacy way of how the data is structured. I believed in it. I pushed for it. I got a lot of alignment across leadership to work in this new kind of data structure. But the true challenge, and honestly, it's a challenge from product, is time to market versus the underlaying how it's built under the hood. I was going for how it's built under the hood. I was pushing for it to be future facing. But in the end, time to market is also what helps drive the business forward. What can you bring to the customer so that it actually moves a needle in terms of revenue or impact upfront, and then in turn continue building under the hood qualities. And I think that one example was a very immediate learning for me, even though adopting the new data structure and how we were expecting the data ocean to be leveraged, great, but we had ways to go to understand as a company how to leverage that better. And being an early adopter of it was great, but to be able to hit time to market, that was not the solution we wanted. And it was not something that we had the time and bandwidth to do due to limited resources. And that's a product learning I had as well, because we're building X, we want to build it in a particular way that works really well. But sometimes you have to make a decision on, do we want to build it future facing or do we want to build it for the now and prioritize that as a day two to make sure we are making it future facing. And it was an immediate learning of how to do that prioritization that requires get to market or for day two.
I want to briefly touch upon this. I don't want to get into this 101 product management thing. What are some of the metrics that you capture as a product manager?
Yeah, I think a lot of the KPIs or metrics, like key performance indicators, they vary per role, right? So I can talk high level.
Yes.
First is if you have a direct customer, what is that impact to the customer? There's something called NPS, which is a net promoter score. That's usually about how does that customer like the product that you're bringing in. It's based on multiple different attributes. That's one that you can leverage. A lot of times, if it's revenue impacting, what does that mean? So that's another KPI to look at. If you're looking at efficiency, operational efficiency, that's another KPI. So a lot of these like high-level KPIs are the KPIs that we holistically call as primary KPIs. Then you have secondary and tertiary KPIs that can feed into them. Let's look at how frequently does this person maybe purchase with this payment method.
Okay.
That then impacts the incremental revenue. Or we look at how often do we see people hover over making a purchase, but they don't purchase. That impacts how they actually perform on the platform. How does that actually then result in incremental revenue? So the primary KPIs are usually operational efficiency, incremental revenue impact, customer adoption. Customer adoption can be based on different attributes. It could be how they're engaging with the platform, so an engagement metric, impression metric, how they're actually using the website online. And those then have secondary and tertiary, which are the true KPIs that you actually can instrument in your code and then feed into seeing, hey, we see a 5% lift in incremental revenue or a 10% impact in operational efficiency. So those are usually how the KPIs are split up.
You've walked away from FinTech, where you had spent years mastering and gaining expertise, and you moved on to Sony PlayStation, which is in gaming. Why did you make that move?
2 reasons. I like FinTech. I liked the FinTech space. I was in compliance and risk. Then I went to lending and kind of like that area of FinTech as well. But FinTech, similar to the medical space, is rigid, and bringing in technology gets challenging. And at the rapid speed technology is changing, these are the industries that do face a lot of challenges because of customer protection, HIPAA concerns, like a bunch of different concerns as well. So one of the things I personally wanted to do was, can I move out of FinTech or finance or in that umbrella of payments? I wanted to experience product, but not necessarily in the FinTech space.
Okay.
Can I see product from someone who is actually working for the person who's sitting at the same restaurant with me? And PlayStation is a type of product that is directly a consumer product. Lending Club is a consumer product, but it is more within the finance and lending space. PlayStation could be the random other person sitting next to you that has PlayStation at home. Yeah. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to move into a company that was non-FinTech, to see if I could kind of get into using product. So vastly different customer base, vastly different behaviors and expectations from the product as well. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to get into that space to just kind of change my perspective on how product is run in a very consumer facing. For me, over PayPal and Lending Club, I started realizing that domain is one pillar. Product is another pillar. They don't have to be coupled together. Mm-hmm. True for engineering and other roles too, but they don't have to be coupled together in my perspective. So I wanted to, it was a very intentional thought process to say, let me decouple myself for some time from a purely finance and FinTech space to see if that's an area that I enjoy. And that was where my main intention was. PlayStation being a very gaming space, I'm not a gamer. It is a challenge, but in light of kind of what I talked about earlier, the opportunity of me going into PlayStation, my hiring manager, who is also a mentor for me now, because I'm not in that role anymore and not in that particular group anymore, but The hiring manager was open to, again, giving opportunities to people who aren't necessarily only domain experts. So I didn't have to be in gaming to be a product manager in that space. And that's where I also believe like product as its own pillar. If you have strong product sense and have the strong product fundamentals, you can apply those in other areas. Of course, you need domain knowledge, but that doesn't mean that you need to couple them so closely that you are only in that domain. And so I think that's where it was a very intentional decision to bump over to Sony.
Where do you see AI is genuinely threatening what product managers do? And where do you think using AI, product managers' role becomes even more important?
Great, timely question, I think, in the current state of where AI is taking over everything. I think if we can leverage the AI tools to better our speed as product managers, that's the best way that we can leverage it. So it isn't necessarily going to risk the role of product because there's a lot of creative thinking that an AI system does, but individual people can do too. But I think that there is a degree of human agility that the AI systems are now going to challenge. So that is definitely there. So I don't deny that. But I don't think we're at that stage yet where it will entirely take that role. It might be there in the near future. But I feel to continue with the current market, as product managers, we need to adopt these tools to help churn out a lot of the product artifacts that we need to do. So that instead of writing a product requirements document for 3 days that have version control and sign off, I can pump all of the information that I want as a product feature with what I'm actually envisioning as a customer use case, what's the customer story, what's the acceptance criteria, into a AI tool that can build the product requirements in a couple minutes. Then I go in and spot check, fix everything as I appropriately see fit, and then tailor down what we can build in A or what we cannot build. And that becomes my product document. So I feel like there are ways to support product with these tools, even as simple as building very basic high-level mocks. I can use an AI tool to build a high-level mock, which I have done, and that helps me bring a product in front of my engineers, in front of my designers, to say, this is what we're thinking of. So it gives a visual to immediately think of what I'm building. And then the design team takes it off and builds it with the true wireframes. The copy team takes it off and helps word, address the wording or the verbiage of how we say something to the customer. And the engineers can take it and actually build the architecture document and then build as well. So I think there are ways to leverage that to help our speed to doing product thinking faster. Maybe in the future that might kind of close the gap. And I think that's where folks in the product role need to take the next step, like figure out how can we better support our role with creative thinking with AI doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us so that we're able to get out more, challenge the thinking more, think about much more expansive data use cases, maybe doing competitive analysis with these AI tools so we're better and faster able to make decisions as opposed to spending a week or 2 weeks of user research to get that information as well.
What's the productivity jump that you see from 1 year before where you didn't have these tools versus how you are using it, and what's the productivity multiplier here?
Yeah, a couple of them actually. It's easier to get very bare bones product definitions built out quickly. I know what the user story is. I know what the problem statement we're solving for. We know some of the data on why we need this. It's very easy for me to build a bare bone product requirements. Prior to AI tools, it takes time to build that. So it was a lot more of like, let's just write a very simplistic product definition, maybe a paragraph or two, and keep it at that. But with the AI tools, I'm able to build a structure right away. So I think that's one big benefit. Number two is when you're bringing a product feature to our team, PMO, engineering, design, copy, words can only do so much. Sometimes having a design mockup, even the most basic design mockup, can show what you're actually trying to implement. can show either block diagrams or actual UX designs as well. I think it helps clarify a lot of questions. It also helps open up a lot more questions earlier in your kickoff and pre-analysis phase, because it gives the folks on the other end a chance to poke at those solutions early on as opposed to later in the stream. So all of this then results in having a tighter time to release.
If an engineer comes to you today and says that in next 3 years or 5 years, I want to be a product manager, what are the steps that you would recommend them to achieve those goals?
I think the biggest one, and of course, basing it off my own experience only, I don't know how it works for other folks, find opportunities where you are right now as an engineer to do product in any definition. It doesn't have to be that you need to move into a product role to be able to do product. You can be a product thought leader and a influence to the product thinking as an engineer. You can step up to that table and have those conversations. So find opportunities to do that in your current role. If it is an opportunity that you can do with a product manager, ask for it. Be open with hearing no, but ask for it so you get an opportunity to get in those conversations. Once you're in those conversations, you'll get an idea of what are the things that you understand and know how to do, what are things that are gaps that you have to build and work on. Start focusing on those. Find someone that can become your kind of guide or mentor to say, hey, these are areas that I think you can work on to improve your product skills. I think that's number one. Number two is once you actually decide that, yes, I'm interested in doing product. Personally, I felt like a lot of my cold emails improved over time. I figured out how to connect with people and ask for their 15 minutes of time that they were very willing to give up and be able to understand what it means to be a product in other people's mindset, because I only saw product in VMware as my own individual. So find opportunities where you can talk to people to learn about product in different areas. You'll start understanding a lot of it is very similar, it's just worded very differently because it's a different industry. So I think that's number two, like learn about it a lot. And you can do this all in parallel. This is not a sequential thing. And then the third one, which I think it's a challenge, but it's something that you have to do. You have to put yourself out there. You never know who might actually be willing to give you that opportunity. Because everyone has come into a product role from a different discipline. Now it's different, but in general, there's no major that is, if you do a product major or minor, you're definitely guaranteed a product role. There's so many product folks that have come from engineering that have great product mindsets, or there are people who have come from program management that are the best product managers. So there's not one route to become a product manager. And so if you're an engineer, don't be scared about saying, hey, I think I'm actually going to be a product manager. Start thinking of yourself as a product manager. Start talking like a product manager about what you do to yourself. You don't even have to necessarily say it outside, and reach out to people that you feel you're interested in going into that company. Ask them for a 15-minute call, find a way to understand that. You might even be able to find connections through your network that can help get referrals in, and or apply online, build an understanding. I'll use one use case. I reached out to a company. In the situation that it was, I actually reached out to the CEO. It was a small company. I mentioned to them, I'm in product. I'm actually passionate about product, but I'm also passionate about the area that they were in, which was a combination of FinTech and as well as supporting small communities within the States and outside to get small business loans to support their life. So I reached out to the CEO. Of course, I didn't hear back right away, but after maybe like a week or so, she responded to me. And as a surprise, she was willing to connect me with someone that was a product leader at their company. I connected with them. I said, hey, I'm interested. I see a role. Would you be available for a conversation? I had a conversation that led to an interview that led to me flying down to LA to do the interview and actually getting the job offer. In the situation that happened, I feel like there's a degree of luck, but there's a degree of me willing to put myself out there to ask. Yeah. Not everyone's going to respond. You're going to get a lot more no's than yeses, but I think that's like one major thing if you want to move, especially if you're moving from like an engineer to a product role. Think of yourself as a product manager. Think of what you're doing as a product person. Start verbalizing your work from a product lens. Once you start doing that and you start believing it, you're going to be able to talk about that to a product person on the other end who might be hiring to say, hey, this person has technical expertise and understands a product from a product perspective. Once you have both of those, that becomes like second nature for you. And then you can keep practicing it, keep improving your story so you know how to convey a product thinking mindset, irrespective of your role and what your title is as well.
What are some of the mistakes that you see engineers do when they move to product?
For me, and maybe across the board also, but the biggest mistake is now that you've come into product, you have to be okay with stepping away from the technical solution. As a product manager, you're actually building a product definition and solving a customer problem. You're not solving how to build a product. That is the biggest challenge as an engineer coming into a product role. You can get close to the engineering team and architecture team and understand the design, but you should not get so integrated with understanding that, because that limits you. You only have limited time.
Yeah.
That limits you from doing other product work that you can do because you're more involved in the technical design. So I feel like you should know the technical design. You should be involved and challenge the engineers to say, hey, why are we doing it this way? Or why are we doing it that way? Especially given your technical skills. But if you get too involved in the technical solution, you kind of lose sight of what you're actually trying to build. And you don't get those opportunities to keep practicing that, right? And I think that's one challenge that I also faced. I got very involved in the technical solutions because I came from a technical background. And I think that creates some hindrance, because then you start thinking only as a technical product manager, but you don't necessarily want to be just a technical product manager. Maybe you want to be a product manager, and you want to step away from the technical solution a little bit as well. So I think that's the one immediate pitfall that people fall
So
in.
you have to unlearn certain things to be more effective at product management.
More than unlearn, I think you have to be willing to let go. You have to say, that might not be the best way to solve it, but that is not my job to figure out.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that. And there are people who are hired to do that job way better, and they're hired for that role.
Looking back, is there a decision that you would want to do differently? Not to avoid failures, but to increase the velocity at which you are growing?
Yes. I'll talk about in my MBA, actually. Because I was doing it part-time, I think the part-time MBA is a great way to learn. But I think that provided a lot, but it also brought a lot of limitations. By choosing to do the part-time MBA, I also gave up opportunities to network with a lot of folks from Anderson. I gave up with a lot of opportunities to participate in, we used to have these case studies that would happen, they're competitions. You can build a whole product for T-Mobile because they came up with a question for you over a weekend. I was not able to dedicate that time. I missed out on opportunities. Network is very important. I missed out on opportunities to build those camaraderie with other folks that are at Anderson that might be at different ages, different grades, or like graduation classes that they have. Anderson has the Innovation Hub. I didn't get to participate in that because of time. Anderson and a lot of part-time programs, they have 3 different versions. They have weekday classes, which are usually 7 to 10 or something. They have Saturday classes. So I was doing the Saturday class. So I was actually flying down to LA for the Saturday class. And then they have online classes, which is what you just said. They do online classes for maybe a month and a half. And then they have one weekend crash course on campus. Because I was doing weekend classes and weekdays were busy with work, I didn't really have a lot of time to fly down for these events that happened on a Thursday evening, or a competition that was happening on Thursday and Friday, or Friday and Saturday, because I had classes on Saturday. So there were certain things that I ended up giving up because I chose to do a part-time program, because I chose to stay employed and I wanted the income. I think the difference that I would do is not about moving to a full-time. I would still do part-time because of financial scenarios, but I would try to push myself to not worry about what will happen if I take one more day and go to LA and participate in this. What will happen if I stay for over the weekend and actually do this competition, or participate in this innovation center that we have and spend maybe a Sunday and Monday there to do a group project.
Yeah.
I think those things I would decide differently. And I think it comes down to understanding how much risk you can take. And sometimes when you decide to not take the risk, that's okay. And I think in my situation, I'm okay that I didn't do that. But I do think if I had done it differently, I think the impact would have been greater. I don't think I would have missed out on staying one extra day there and had any impact on my work. But what I would have gotten was maybe a way to get into the incubator system there. So I have that network.
Yeah.
And right now, for example, a lot of people at my company are Anderson alums, and I'm leaning into that network now. But if I was able to lean into it sooner, I think I would have. Time is exactly. Time is opportunity. So if I had leaned into it a little bit sooner, I maybe would have created a larger network.
Yeah.
So I would do that differently.